It's not that hard. Just stop thinking so much.
I'm not thinking.
You're always thinking.
Nobody ever plans to fall for the man they
What an
screamed at through a
absolute
car window
idiot.
on a
I can't
Tuesday
believe
morning.
that just happened.
It is not the kind of thing that makes it onto a vision
You're
board
protecting the
or into a
restraint because you're
5-year
afraid
plan.
loud means losing what it is.
June
It doesn't.
Wilder certainly never planned for
Friday.
it.
Thursday.
June Wilder had, in fact, spent a considerable amount of energy planning for the exact opposite. A clean, sensible, unbothered life in the city she had loved her entire 28 years of existing in it. New York had given her everything she needed. Good friends, a career she had built from the ground up, an apartment she had furnished herself, a dance class she had been meaning to try, and a commute she had long since made her peace with. She had a system. She had a routine. She had, until that Tuesday morning on the FDR Drive, never once considered herself a person capable of genuine road rage. The closest June Wilder had ever come to committing a crime was that morning, behind the wheel of her car, staring at a man who had the nerve, the absolute nerve, to look completely unbothered while being entirely, obviously, unarguably at fault. She would not find out until later how badly she had misjudged that last part. She would not find out until much later what the rest of it would cost her. It started, as most disasters do, with terrible timing. June had been running 4 minutes late, which for her was practically a personal crisis. She had a 9 o'clock at the office and a coffee going cold in the cup holder and the kind of focused, forward momentum that New York mornings demanded. She had merged cleanly onto the FDR, found her lane, and was doing everything right. That was the part she would repeat to Dara later, multiple times, with increasing emphasis. She was doing everything right. The black car came from her left. Not aggressively, not dramatically, just with the calm, unhurried confidence of someone who had decided the lane was theirs and had not thought to consult her about it. June hit the brake. Her coffee cup lurched. She did not, and this was important, spill it, but it was close, and the almost was enough. She pressed her horn once, long and deliberate. The black car stopped. She stopped. For one suspended moment, nothing happened. Then his window came down. He was Korean, sharply dressed, even from this angle, with the kind of expression that did not so much communicate irritation as it simply withheld everything else. He looked at her with the patient, settled calm of a man who had decided he was not the problem and had moved on from the question entirely. "You cut in front of me," June said. Her voice was controlled. She was being very controlled. "The lane was merging," he said. His English was precise. "I merged. Into my car. I did not touch your car. You almost touched my car, which on the FDR at 8:56 in the morning is effectively the same thing." He looked at her for a moment, not with anger, which would have been understandable, but with something closer to mild assessment, as though he was deciding how much of his attention and energy this situation deserved. It was the most irritating thing June had ever seen. It finally seemed like he decided it wasn't worth it. "You were not in my blind spot," he said calmly. "You were behind me. I was beside you. You were behind me." "I was—" June stopped, took a breath. He was pissing her off already. Behind her, someone else had begun to honk, the city's gentle reminder that their problems were not the city's problems. "You know what," she said. "I don't have time for this. Watch where you're going." "Drive carefully next time," he said, with such complete and false pleasantness that it landed like an insult. June's window went up. His window went up. Traffic moved. She made it to the office in 7 minutes, parked, and sat in the car for an extra 30 seconds doing nothing. Then she picked up her coffee, took a long sip, and walked inside. She told Dara about it at 11:30 over desk lunches, her hands moving the way they always did when a story needed full physical performance. "He said drive carefully," she said, "like I was the one who almost caused an accident, like I was a child." Dara, who had known June for 11 years and therefore knew better than to offer alternative perspectives at this stage of the retelling, made an appropriately sympathetic sound. "That's insane," she said. "It was insane. He was completely calm the whole time. That's what got me. He wasn't even annoyed. He was just settled, like he'd already decided he was right and nothing I said was going to register." "What did he look like?" June pointed at her. "That is not relevant." Dara smiled into her salad. "He was insufferable," June said. "Completely, thoroughly insufferable. I hope I never see him again. She meant it entirely. There was not a single part of her that did not mean it. She would remember saying it later. She would remember it with great clarity. If you are new here, welcome to the channel. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join the Nesties. We would love to have you. And if you have been here a while, you already know what we do. Like this video, share it with somebody who needs a good story, and drop a comment before you leave. I want to know, have you ever been so completely 100% certain that you were right about someone, only for life to turn around and make you look like a fool? Because that is exactly where we are going today. Stay with us. The brief came through on Thursday. June's firm, Wilder & Associates, named after herself because she had built it herself at 24, with 2 clients and a shared office space in Midtown that she had outgrown within 18 months, had been approached by a Korean skincare and wellness brand looking to establish itself in the American market. The brand was called SCO, which June had looked up and found meant to unfold, to open. She had liked that immediately. The brief was clean, the budget was serious, and the potential for a long-term partnership was exactly the kind of account her firm had been positioned for. Her assistant Marcus had slid the folder across her desk with the quiet satisfaction of someone delivering good news. "Meetings Monday," he said. 10 o'clock, conference room B. "Who's the contact?" "The founder. He flew in from Seoul about 3 weeks ago. His sister lives here, apparently, so he's been using New York as the base for expansion." June had nodded, already reading. The brand's existing identity was elegant and restrained. Clean packaging, minimal language, a visual language that was confident but had not yet learned how to speak to an American consumer. There was real work to be done here. Interesting work. She had spent the weekend thinking about it in the background of everything else she did, the way good briefs had a habit of following her around. Monday came the way Mondays always did in New York, with too much going on and not enough grace period between the weekend and the week. June arrived at the office at 8:30, reviewed her notes, changed the order of 2 slides in her opening presentation, changed them back, and was in conference room B at 9:58 with her laptop open and her coffee on the table and the particular kind of focused calm she had trained herself into over years of client work. Marcus opened the door at 10 o'clock exactly. "Ms. Wilder," he said, "you're 10 o'clock." June looked up. The man who walked in was sharply dressed, unhurried, and carrying the kind of settled composure that did not so much fill a room as it quietly organized it. He looked at her the way he had looked at her through a car window on the FDR Drive the previous Tuesday, with mild, patient assessment, as though he had already done the math and was simply waiting to confirm the answer. She recognized him in the half-second before he recognized her, which meant she had just enough time to feel the bottom drop out of her stomach before she pulled her face back to professional neutral. He stopped. Not dramatically. Just a fractional pause, the kind you would miss if you were not specifically watching for it, before he continued to the chair across from her and set down his folder with the same calm with which he appeared to do everything. "Ms. Wilder," he said. "Mr. Park," she said. Marcus had given her the name on Friday. She was grateful for it now. "Please, sit down." He sat. She did not look away from her laptop screen for 2 full seconds longer than necessary, which she would not have done under any other circumstances, and which she was furious at herself for. "I appreciate you making time," he said. "Of course, that's what we're here for." She turned the laptop toward him, presentation pulled up. Pure reflex. "I've had a chance to review the brief in detail, and I have some initial thoughts on positioning. But before we get into that, I'd like to hear from you directly about the brand's vision for this market. Numbers and research can tell me a lot, but the founder always tells me more." Something changed imperceptibly in his expression. Not surprise exactly. Recalibration. "That's a reasonable approach," he said. "Thank you," she said with complete professionalism. He talked about SEO for 20 minutes. June listened and took notes and asked questions, and somewhere in the middle of it, she stopped noticing the FDR and started noticing the answers instead. He had built the brand from a single product, a recovery serum he had developed after his mother's long illness, something rooted in traditional Korean skincare principles but formulated for modern application. The brand had grown because of word of mouth, not marketing spend. He had been deliberate about not scaling too quickly. He had opinions about what American wellness culture got wrong about skin and was not shy about saying so, though he said it with the same measured calm he appeared to bring to everything. He was, June thought with great reluctance, not an idiot. Your current visual identity is strong, she said when he finished, but it's speaking a language that American consumers haven't been taught to read yet. That's not a flaw in the brand. It's a positioning opportunity. The luxury wellness space here is crowded at the surface, but there's a real gap for something that comes with actual philosophy behind it. That's what SEO has. The question is how we let people feel that without over-explaining it. He looked at her for a moment. You understood that from the brief? I understood it from what you just told me, she said. The brief gave me the outline. You gave me the brand. Another small recalibration. When can you have a full proposal ready? End of the week. Thursday, he said. Friday, she said. He considered this with the air of a man who did not often negotiate downward. Friday, he agreed. They shook hands at the door of the conference room, which was when June remembered that the last time they had been within arm's reach of each other, he had told her to drive carefully, and she had wanted to throw something. She smiled. He nodded. The door closed. June walked directly to Dara's office, shut the door behind her, and stood in the middle of the room for a moment without saying anything. Dara looked up from her screen. How was the 10 o'clock? Fine, June said. You closed the door. It's him. Dara put down her pen. Him who? The FDR, June said. Tuesday, the black car. Dara stared at her. Then, slowly, the corners of her mouth began to move. Do not, June said. I'm not doing anything. You are doing something with your face. June. I can handle this, June said. It's a client relationship. There is a clear professional structure. Whatever happened on Tuesday is completely irrelevant now, and we are both adults who can behave accordingly. She said it the way people said things they needed to be true. I just needed to tell someone. Dara nodded very seriously. Absolutely, she said, very professional. Thank you. He's cute, isn't he? June picked up her laptop from Dara's desk where she had set it down and walked back out. The dance studio was called Pulse, and it sat on the third floor of a building on West 28th Street with tall windows and wood floors and the kind of energy that made you feel like you had made a good decision just by walking in. June had been meaning to try it for 4 months. She had found it through a friend of a friend, had followed their page, had watched the reels with the idle curiosity of someone who danced well and privately knew it, and had simply not made the time. This week, she had decided to make the time. She showed up on Wednesday evening in her favorite workout set, feeling like herself, feeling like a person whose professional life was completely under control and whose Tuesday had been entirely unremarkable. She filled out the new member form at the front desk, got her locker key, and walked into Studio 1. She saw him before he saw her. He was standing near the far wall with a woman who could only be his sister. Same jawline, same watchful quality in the eyes, though where his stillness read as composure, hers read as amusement, like she was perpetually on the edge of finding something funny. The sister was talking and gesturing toward the center of the room. He was listening with the expression of a man who had agreed to something and was now privately questioning the decision. June stopped walking. The rational part of her brain, the part that had handled the Monday meeting with complete professionalism and had delivered a first-rate proposal by Friday morning, offered a calm and reasonable explanation. New York was a big city with millions of people, and statistically, any two people who existed within overlapping social and geographic radius would eventually appear in the same space. This was not unusual. This was not suspicious. This was simply the city doing what the city did. The rest of her brain said, absolutely not. She turned on her heel and walked back toward the door with great purpose. She made it approximately 4 steps before the instructor, a tall woman named Chloe with a clipboard and no concept of bad timing, appeared in front of her. Hi, new member? Chloe said, with the cheerful authority of someone who had never once let a student leave before class started. I was just... June gestured vaguely toward the hallway. You're just in time, actually. We're about to pair everyone up. Chloe checked her clipboard. June? Yes, June said with the tone of someone accepting a sentence. Perfect. Come on in. She was walked directly into the room. She kept her eyes forward with great discipline until Chloe's pairing system, which appeared to work by proximity and misfortune, placed her beside a man she recognized on every level she wished she did not. Seungmin looked at her. June looked at him. The sister, standing 2 feet away, looked at both of them with an expression that understood something had happened, and was delighted by it. "You have got to be kidding me," June said. She said it quietly, under her breath, to no one in particular and the universe in general. "Miss Wilder," Seungmin said. "Mr. Park." She turned to face forward. "This is a coincidence." "Yes," he said, after a pause that lasted slightly too long. "I had been meaning to try this studio for 4 months. I signed up last week," he said. "Your sister signed you up last week," the sister said helpfully from his other side. She leaned slightly forward to look at June. "I'm Soo-yeon, his younger sister. You two know each other?" "He's a client," June said. "She's my brand strategist," Seungmin said at the same time. Soo-yeon looked between them with the bright, unhurried interest of someone filing everything away. "Fun," she said simply. Chloe called the class to attention before June could respond to that, which was probably fortunate. The first 20 minutes were foundational. Basic frame, basic footwork. The kind of structured beginning that June moved through without effort. Her body understanding rhythm the way it understood breathing. She was not showing off. She was simply not having to try, which was its own kind of visible. Seungmin beside her was trying. He had the focus for it. She could see that. He was not careless or impatient. He listened when Chloe corrected him, adjusted, tried again. But his body had not learned to stop thinking yet, and dancing required at a certain point exactly that. He was a half beat behind in a way that was not dramatic, but was consistent. "You've danced before," he said during a water break without looking at her. "Since I was 7, she said. He nodded once, absorbing this with the equanimity he appeared to apply to most information. "You haven't," she said. "No." "Why this, then?" He was quiet for a moment. "I've spent a long time doing the things I'm already good at," he said. It seemed like a reasonable time to try something else. June looked at him sideways. It was a more honest answer than she had expected, and it landed somewhere she didn't immediately have a response for. She took a sip of water and looked back at the floor. When the pairing resumed for the second half of class, and Chloe moved them through a simple partnered exercise, close hold, nothing complicated, just frame and basic movement, June became aware with the specific irritation of someone who prided themselves on composure that Seungmin's hand at her back was creating a small and entirely unreasonable amount of internal noise. She focused on the footwork. He focused on the footwork. They made it through without incident. After class, pulling on her jacket in the lobby, June became aware of him standing a few feet away, doing the same thing. Soo-yeon had stepped out to take a phone call. "I want to be clear about something," June said. He looked at her. "I signed up for this studio before Monday," she said. "I have documentation. I have the confirmation email with a timestamp." Something moved through his expression so quickly she almost missed it. "I wasn't suggesting anything." "Good. Though I do find it notable," he said, with the exact measured calm he had used on the FDR drive, "that you felt the need to clarify." "I find it notable," June said, "that you're here at all." "My sister recommended it," she said. "Yes, and it is a very large city, Mr. Park." "It is," he agreed. They looked at each other for one beat too long. Soo-yeon reappeared from outside, looked between them, and said nothing. She was, June was beginning to understand, very good at saying nothing while communicating everything. June said goodnight and walked out into the cool evening air of West 28th Street and did not look back, which required slightly more effort than it should have. The following 3 weeks established a rhythm that June refused to describe as comfortable, but could not honestly describe as anything else. Mondays and Wednesdays were client meetings. She would arrive at the office, set up the conference room, and Seungmin would arrive at the agreed time, not early, never late, and they would work. He was a good client in the ways that mattered. He was prepared, he was direct, and he did not waste her time with indecision. When she presented a direction he disagreed with, he said so clearly and explained why, which she respected infinitely more than the clients who nodded along and then quietly dismantled everything by email 3 days later. When she presented something he agreed with, he said that too, without performance, just a simple yes, that works, and they move forward. She was building CO's American identity from the inside out, and it was genuinely good work. The brand had a story worth telling. She just had to find the language the American market would feel rather than simply hear. "You're protective of the restraint," she said one Wednesday, about 2 weeks in, when he had pushed back on a campaign concept she'd been excited about. "You think if we make it too loud, we lose what it is." "Yes," he said. "I don't disagree with that," she said. "I'm just asking you to trust that there's a version of loud that doesn't compromise quiet. Americans don't distrust subtlety because they're shallow. They distrust it because nobody's ever taken the time to let them into it. That's the job." He was quiet for a moment, then, "Show me a version of that." "Give me until Friday." "Thursday." "Friday," she said. He almost smiled. She noticed and looked back at her screen immediately. Fridays and Saturdays were the studio. By the third week, Sungmin had stopped being half a beat behind, which June noted with the grudging fairness she applied to things she did not particularly want to acknowledge. He had simply worked at it, the same way he appeared to work at everything, without announcement, without fuss, until the problem was no longer a problem. "You practiced," she said on a Wednesday evening, after Chloe had them move through a combination he'd been struggling with the previous session. "A little," he said. "In your apartment?" "In my apartment?" She thought about this. "Did your neighbors complain?" "One of them knocked on the wall," he said. "Twice." June laughed before she could stop herself. It came out fully and without warning, the kind of laugh that didn't ask permission, and when she looked back at him, he was watching her with an expression she couldn't immediately name. Not quite surprise. Something quieter than that. Soo-yeon, who had stayed on as a regular attendee and had positioned herself as June's unofficial studio companion with a commitment June found both transparent and genuinely enjoyable, appeared at her elbow during the water break. "He practiced for 4 days," she said, at a volume that was technically a whisper. "He moved the coffee table." "Soo-yeon," Sungmin said from 2 feet away. "I'm just saying." June pressed her lips together and looked at the ceiling. She and Soo-yeon had fallen into an easy friendship the way June fell into most friendships, naturally and quickly, because she was the kind of person who made space for people without thinking about it. Soo-yeon was sharp and warm and said exactly what she thought, with just enough timing to make it land rather than sting. June liked her immediately and completely, and was choosing not to examine how much of that was entirely separate from her feelings about the brother. The conversations at the studio were different from the conversations in the conference room, less structured, less bounded by agenda and deliverables. They happened in the margins, during breaks, walking out, waiting for Soo-yeon to stop talking to Chloe about something. Sungmin asked about New York once, genuinely, the way someone asked about a place they were trying to understand rather than simply inhabit. "What do you actually love about it?" he said. "Not the obvious things." June thought about it properly, which she appreciated being given the space to do. "The anonymity that isn't lonely," she said finally. "You can be completely alone in the city and still feel like you're part of something. That's hard to find." He considered this. "Seoul has that too," he said. "But it's louder." "New York is loud." "New York is loud on the outside," he said. "Seoul is loud on the inside. People carry more expectation here." She looked at him. "That's a very specific observation for someone who's been here 3 weeks. 5 weeks, Ibotsu," he said. "I arrived before the—" He stopped. "Before the FDR," she finished. The silence that followed was different from their earlier silences, less guarded, almost conversational. "I was late that morning," he said. "I had a call with Seoul at 9 and I miscalculated the traffic. I was 4 minutes late to my office," she said, "which for me is significant," he said, with a certainty that meant Soo-yeon had told him something at some point and she was going to address that later. "Significant," she agreed. They were both quiet for a moment. Outside, the city made its usual uninterrupted noise. "I was in the right lane," she said without heat. Almost conversational. "The lanes were merging," he said the same way. "You could have waited. You could have let me in." June stopped. Something about the rhythm of the exchange, easy and familiar in a way that had no business being either of those things, made the argument feel less like an argument and more like a language they had somehow already learned. She shook her head. "Good night, Mr. Park." "Good night, Miss Wilder," he said. She was halfway down the block when Soo-Yan fell into step beside her, having appeared from nowhere with the timing of someone who had been waiting. "Don't," June said. "I didn't say anything." "You were going to." Soo-Yan smiled and tucked her hands into her jacket pockets. "I was just going to say he talked about your proposal for 40 minutes at dinner last week, the one about letting people feel the brand rather than hear it." She paused. "He doesn't talk about work at dinner." June kept walking. The city moved around her the way it always did, indifferent and enormous and full of its own business. "He's a client," she said. Said Soo-Yan. "That's a professional observation he made about a professional deliverable." "Absolutely," said Soo-Yan. They walked another half block in comfortable silence. 40 minutes, June said. Soo-Yan smiled at the pavement. Give or take. It was a Friday evening at the studio when everything changed. They had stayed late. Soo-Yan had left early. A dinner, she said, with the innocence of someone who had engineered a dinner. And Chloe had dimmed the main lights after the last class, leaving the side lights on for the two of them to finish the combination they had been working through. It was a simple thing, staying. Neither of them had made a decision about it. They had simply not left. The music was low. The city hummed outside the tall windows. June walked him through the sequence again, her hand adjusting his frame, her voice quiet and precise in the way it got when she was focused. And something about the evening, the light, the accumulated weeks of conference rooms and water breaks and sidewalk conversations had made the usual careful distance between them feel less like a boundary and more like a habit neither of them had thought to question. They moved through the combination. He did not miss the beat. There, she said. You had it. I had it last week, he said. You had the steps last week, she said. Tonight you had the feeling. He looked at her. They were still in hold, her hand in his at her back, close enough that she was aware of every point of contact with a specificity she had been managing successfully for 3 weeks and was managing significantly less successfully right now. June, he said. It was the first time he had used her name, not Ms. Wilder, delivered with professional precision, just June, quiet and direct, and it landed somewhere in her chest with a weight she was not prepared for. Don't, she said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of it for being steady. I haven't said anything yet. I know what you're going to say. Do you? He said. Not a challenge. Genuine. She stepped back, out of hold, and he let her because he was not the kind of man who didn't let people move. She turned to pick up her water bottle and stood with her back to him for a moment, giving herself the seconds she needed. This is a professional relationship, she said, and I am very good at my job, and so I would like to keep it that way. You are very good at your job, he said. That has nothing to do with what I'm going to say. She turned around. Sungmin was watching her with the same steady, settled patience he brought to everything, except that there was nothing detached about it right now. He was completely present, completely clear. I think about you, he said simply. At the office, when you explain something and you're right, and you know you're right, but you still wait for me to arrive there myself, on the walk out, at dinner, apparently for 40 minutes at a time, according to my sister, who I will be speaking to. Something moved through his expression. I thought about you before I knew your name. On the FDR, after you drove away, I thought about you. June stared at him. You were insufferable on the FDR. You called me a menace to society. You told me to drive carefully. You were driving very emotionally, he said, and there was something in his voice, careful and warm, and containing the precise shape of a smile he wasn't quite releasing, that undid something in her chest she'd been keeping firmly together. Sungmin, I'm not asking you for anything you're not ready to give, he said. I just needed you to know, because I think you already know, and you've been waiting for me to say it plainly, so I'm saying it plainly." He paused. "That's all." June looked at him for a long moment. The studio was quiet around them. The city moved outside the windows, indifferent and enormous, doing what it always did. "I have never," she said slowly, "met anyone who communicates the way you do." "Is that good or bad?" "I haven't decided yet." He waited. He was, she had come to understand, extraordinarily good at waiting. He did not fill silences with noise or reassurance. He simply held them and let her move through them at her own pace, which was the most disarming thing about him and had been from almost the beginning. "The FDR was your fault," she said. "I know," he said. She blinked. "You, what?" "I saw you in the lane," he said. "I merged anyway. I thought I had the space. I didn't." He held her gaze. "You were right." June opened her mouth, closed it. The specific satisfaction of being told she was right, which she had wanted since 8:56 on a Tuesday morning, arrived now entirely stripped of its triumph because he was looking at her like that, and she had run out of things to do with her hands. "That would have been useful information 3 weeks ago," she said. "You weren't ready to hear it 3 weeks ago." "I was absolutely—" She stopped. "I was not ready 3 weeks ago," she admitted. He smiled then, fully, properly, without restraint, and it rearranged something in the architecture of his face that June realized she had been waiting to see for longer than she had known she was waiting. It was warm and a little crooked and entirely unguarded, and it was the most undone she had felt since the whole thing started. She crossed the distance between them. He met her halfway, which she would think about later. The fact that he moved too, that he did not stand still and let her come to him but closed the space from his side as well, unhurried and certain, like a man who had made a decision and was not second-guessing it. When he kissed her, it was quiet and deliberate, one hand coming up to her face with a gentleness that was somehow more disarming than anything else that had happened in the last 40 minutes. She felt him exhaling. She felt herself stop holding everything so carefully. Outside the windows, New York continued without them, which was the thing June had always loved about it. The city asked nothing of you, judged nothing, simply kept moving and let you have your moments inside it without commentary. When they pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers, and neither of them said anything for a moment. "I'm still charging you full rate," she said. He laughed, low and genuine, and she felt it more than she heard it. "I would expect nothing less," he said. She pulled back to look at him properly. He looked back, settled and warm and entirely without pretense. And June Wilder, who had spent a Tuesday morning on the FDR Drive completely certain she was right about a stranger, understood finally what she had actually been right about. Just not in the way she expected. And that's the story of June Wilder and Park Sung-min, two people who started at their worst and found their way to something genuinely good. If you made it to the end, thank you for being here. You are the reason we do this. Now we want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me, when June walked into that dance studio and saw him standing there, what was going through your mind? Did you think she was going to run or stay and fight? Let me know. And if you haven't already, hit that like button. Share this with someone who deserves a good love story and subscribe so you never miss what I put out next. I'll see you in the next one.